Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight we're diving into the ancient and intricate world of Chinese mythology. As always, let me know where in the world you're listening from. Get cozy, settle in, and let's begin. In the beginning, there was no heaven, no earth, no sun, no moon. There was only chaos, a great cosmic egg swirling in the darkness of nothingness. This was not the chaos of disorder, but the chaos of potential, where all things existed in possibility but not in form. For 18,000 years, this egg turned slowly in the void. And within it, something stirred. A being, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, grew larger with each passing millennium. His name was Pangu, the first, the ancient one, the cosmic giant who would shape all that was to come. When Pangu finally opened his eyes, he found himself trapped within the shell of chaos. The darkness pressed against him, suffocating and endless. With a great roar that no one could hear, for there were no ears yet to hear it, he grasped a mighty axe. Some say it appeared in his hand, others that it was formed from his will alone and struck at the shell surrounding him. The egg cracked, and from that crack came the first light. The lighter, purer elements rose upward, becoming the sky, the heavens, Yang itself. The heavier, denser elements sank downward, becoming the earth, the soil, the yin. And between them stood Pangu, his feet planted on the new earth, his hands pushing against the new sky. For 18,000 years more, Pangu stood between heaven and earth, growing 10 feet taller each day. The sky rose higher, the earth grew thicker, and the giant himself became more immense. He feared that if he rested, if he lowered his arms even for a moment, heaven and earth would collapse back into chaos, and all his work would be undone. Finally, exhausted beyond measure, Pangu could hold no longer. But by then, the separation was complete. Heaven and earth were fixed in their places, and they would not merge again. And so Pangu fell, but his death was not an ending. It was a transformation, a final gift to the world he had created. His breath became the wind and clouds. His voice became the thunder. His left eye became the sun. His right eye became the moon. His 4 limbs and 5 extremities became the 4 cardinal directions and the 5 sacred mountains. His blood became the rivers, his veins the roads and paths. His muscles became the fertile soil, his hair and beard became the stars in the heavens. His skin and body hair became the grass and trees. His teeth and bones became metal and stone. His marrow became jade and pearls. His sweat became rain and dew. And from the parasites upon his body, touched by the wind and blessed by the rain, came humanity, not noble or divine, but born of the greatest sacrifice, children of the first being, carved from chaos itself. This was the first story, the oldest tale. But it was not the only one. There are other tellings, older perhaps, or simply different, shaped by the countless voices that carried them through the ages. In these stories, the creator was not a giant, but a goddess, Nüwa, whose name means woman serpent or snail goddess. After Pangu's sacrifice, or perhaps instead of it, the world was formed but empty. The mountains rose high, the rivers flowed deep, the forests grew thick, but there was no laughter, no song, no consciousness to appreciate the beauty of creation. Nüwa walked through this silent world, her serpent's tail leaving patterns in the mud beside the yellow river. She was powerful and ancient, a deity of creation and renewal, and yet she felt a profound loneliness. One day, she knelt beside the river and scooped up yellow clay from its banks. With careful hands, she shaped it, forming a figure in miniature, with arms and legs, a head and body. She breathed upon it, and the clay became flesh. She set it upon the ground, and it laughed, danced, and ran away into the world. Delighted, Nüwa made more. She fashioned them one by one, each unique, each alive. But the work was slow, and the world was vast. So she took a rope, dipped it in the clay, and swung it around her. Where drops of clay fell from the rope, they became people. Those she shaped by hand became the nobles, the wise, the rulers. Those formed from the scattered drops became the common people, the workers, the farmers. And so humanity spread across the earth, filling the silence with voices. But Nüwa's work was not finished. One day, the pillars that held up the sky began to crack. Two gods, Wukong and Zhuangshu, fought a terrible battle. Wukong, the water god, with the body of a serpent and the head of a man, raged against Zhuangshu, god of the north. In his fury and defeat, Wukong smashed his head against Mount Buzhao, one of the cosmic pillars that held up the sky. The pillar shattered. The sky tilted toward the northwest and the earth tilted toward the southeast. This is why, even today, the rivers of China flow southeast and the stars appear to move westward across the sky. Fire raged across the land, floods swallowed the valleys, and monstrous beasts emerged from the wilderness to devour humanity. Nüwa could not let her children perish. She gathered stones of 5 colors from the riverbeds, smelted them in a great fire, and used the molten rock to patch the broken sky. She killed a giant turtle and used its 4 legs as new pillars to support the heavens. She slew the black dragon that terrorized the land and drove back the floods with walls of reeds and ash. The sky was mended, but it would never be quite the same. The tilt remained, a reminder of the cosmic battle, a scar written into the very structure of the world. Exhausted, Nüwa withdrew from the world, leaving humanity to find its own path. But she was remembered, worshipped as the mother goddess, the mender of the sky, the protector of all living things. After the age of creation came the age of the divine rulers, the culture heroes who taught humanity how to live, how to survive, how to become civilized. These were not distant, aloof gods, but teacher kings who walked among people and gave them the gifts of knowledge. The stories vary, as old stories always do, but most agree on the names and deeds of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the legendary rulers who laid the foundation of Chinese civilization. First among them was Fuxi, sometimes called the brother or husband of Nüwa. He too had the body of a serpent and the head of a man. Fuxi taught humanity to hunt and fish, to domesticate animals, and to cook food with fire. But his greatest gift was order. Fuxi looked at the world and saw patterns. He saw the alternation of day and night, the cycle of seasons, the relationship between heaven and earth, between male and female, between activity and rest. He drew these patterns in lines, 8 trigrams, the bagua, each one representing a fundamental force. Heaven, earth, thunder, wind, water, fire, mountain, lake. These trigrams became the foundation of the I Ching, the book of changes, the ancient text of divination and philosophy that would guide Chinese thought for thousands of years. In drawing these lines, Fuxi gave humanity the ability to understand the cosmos, to see the patterns beneath the chaos. After Fuxi came Chang'e, the divine farmer. He appeared with the head of a bull and the body of a man, or in some tellings, he was simply a wise king. The people of his time were starving, living only on what they could hunt or gather. Chang'e walked through the forests and fields, tasting every plant he found, determining which was safe to eat and which were poisonous. He tasted hundreds of plants each day, sometimes poisoning himself dozens of times before sunset. But each time he would find the antidote, discover the cure, and record his findings. From his experiments came the knowledge of agriculture, the cultivation of the 5 grains: rice, millet, barley, wheat, and soybeans. Chang'e taught the people to plow and plant, to tend crops and harvest them. He showed them which herbs could heal sickness and which could cause harm. He invented the plow and the market, bringing abundance and trade to humanity. Before Chang'e, people wandered. After him, they settled, built villages, and created civilization. The third sovereign was the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, the most famous of all the legendary rulers. He was both a warrior and a sage, a king who united the tribes and brought order to chaos. Huangdi's reign was marked by great battles. He fought against Qiyu, a monstrous war god with a bronze head and iron forehead, who ate sand and stones and led an army of demons. The battles raged for years, shaking the mountains and darkening the skies. Finally, with the help of a dragon and a compass that always pointed south, even when Qiyu summoned mists to confuse the armies, Huangdi captured and executed the demon king. But Huangdi was not merely a warrior. He was a bringer of civilization. He established the calendar, dividing the year into seasons and months. He invented the bow and arrow, the cart and the boat. His wife, Lei Zhu, discovered silk when a cocoon fell into her tea, and she noticed how the threads could be unwound and woven. Huangdi also systematized Chinese medicine, working with his ministers to catalog diseases and their treatments. He is credited with writing the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, a foundational text that shaped medical practice for millennia. After Huangdi came the 5 emperors, legendary sage kings who continued the work of civilization. Zhuan Shu, the grandson of Huangdi, organized the calendar and established religious rites. Emperor Ku studied astronomy and music, bringing harmony between heaven and earth. Emperor Yao was renowned for his wisdom and benevolence, ruling for nearly 100 years and choosing his successor not by blood but by merit. Yao selected Shun, a poor farmer of remarkable virtue, to succeed him. Shun, despite a cruel father and a scheming stepmother who repeatedly tried to kill him, never wavered in his filial piety. When he became emperor, he ruled with justice and compassion, earning the loyalty of all the people. Shun, in turn, chose Yu the Great as his successor, not because Yu was his son, but because Yu had proven himself through an act of heroism that would define an age. During the reign of Emperor Yao, a great calamity befell the land. Massive floods engulfed the Yellow River Valley, drowning fields and villages, forcing people to flee to the mountains. The waters rose for years without ceasing, and it seemed the world would drown. Emperor Yao called upon Gun, a minister and engineer, to control the floods. Gun worked for 9 years, building dams and dikes, trying to hold back the waters through sheer force. But the dams broke, the dikes crumbled, and the floods only grew worse. For his failure, Gun was exiled and died in disgrace. But from his body emerged his son, Yu, who inherited his father's determination but not his methods. Yu understood that fighting the water would not work. Instead, he would guide it, channel it, work with its nature rather than against it. For 13 years, Yu traveled across the land, from the highest mountains to the lowest valleys. He dredged riverbeds, dug canals, and created waterways to guide the floodwaters safely to the sea. The work was brutal. Yu's hands became calloused, his body bent with labor. 3 times he passed by his own house and heard his wife and children inside, but he did not stop to rest or visit. The people needed him, and he would not fail them. Yu divided the land into 9 provinces, each with its own geography and resources. He established trade routes between them, created systems of tribute and taxation, and laid the foundation for what would become the First Dynasty. When the floods were finally tamed, Emperor Shun called Yu before him and offered him the throne. Yu at first refused, believing he was unworthy, but Shun insisted, and when Shun died, Yu became emperor. Yu ruled with the same dedication he had shown in taming the floods. He established the Xia dynasty, China's first hereditary dynasty, though whether it truly existed as a historical state or remains a legend is debated even today. What is not debated is the power of Yu's story. He became the symbol of diligence, sacrifice, and public service. His example taught that rulers must serve their people, not themselves, and that great deeds require great sacrifice. In the spaces between these ancient tales, in the rivers and mountains, in the clouds and seas, moved creatures of immense power and wisdom. Dragons. But these were not the fire-breathing monsters of Western myth, hoarding gold and terrorizing villages. Chinese dragons were different, divine, benevolent spirits of water and weather, symbols of imperial power and cosmic order. Dragons came in many forms. There were celestial dragons, who guarded the heavens and pulled the chariots of gods. There were spiritual dragons, who controlled the rain and wind, bringing life to crops and filling the rivers. There were earth dragons, who marked the courses of rivers and streams, shaping the landscape itself. And there were treasure-guarding dragons, who protected hidden wealth and sacred knowledge. The Dragon King, Longwang, ruled the seas from his crystal palace beneath the waves. He had 4 brothers, each governing one of the cardinal seas: the East Sea, the South Sea, the West Sea, and the North Sea. Each Dragon King commanded legions of sea creatures, controlled the weather in his domain, and possessed treasures beyond imagination. Dragons could shapeshift, appearing as humans when they wished, or as old men with flowing beards who dispensed wisdom to those who showed them respect. They were associated with the emperor, whose throne was called the Dragon Throne, and whose robes were embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, a symbol of supreme authority. But dragons were not merely symbols. Stories told of encounters between humans and dragons, of scholars who befriended dragon princes, of fishermen who saved young dragons and were rewarded with pearls that granted wishes, of villages that built temples to dragon kings and received rain in times of drought. One famous tale speaks of a young scholar who fell in love with a beautiful woman by a lake. She revealed herself to be a dragon princess, transformed into human form. They married, but her father, the Dragon King, disapproved and summoned her back to the underwater palace. The scholar mourned for years until, moved by his devotion, the Dragon King allowed his daughter to return to the surface once each year to visit her human husband. Dragons represented the balance between yin and yang, between earth and heaven, between mortal and divine. They were creatures of transformation and change, of water that could nurture or destroy, of power that could bless or curse. To see a dragon was to witness the sacred, to glimpse the forces that shaped the world itself. As dynasties rose and fell, as emperors claimed the mandate of heaven and philosophers debated the nature of existence, another current ran through Chinese mythology, one quieter but no less powerful: the pursuit of immortality. Unlike many traditions where immortality was the sole province of gods, in Chinese belief, humans could aspire to transcend death. Through cultivation of the body and spirit, through alchemy and meditation, through virtue and knowledge, one might become an immortal, a Xian, dwelling in paradises hidden from mortal eyes. The 8 immortals, the Xian, became the most famous of these transcendent beings. Each had been mortal once. Each had found their own path to immortality, and together they represented different aspects of humanity: youth and age, wealth and poverty, masculine and feminine, learned and simple. Lu Dongbin, the scholar warrior, carried a magic sword that could slay demons and ignorance alike. He wandered the earth in disguise, testing people's virtue and granting blessings to those who proved worthy. Xianggu, the only woman among the 8, achieved immortality by eating a magic peach given to her by a goddess in a dream. She carried a lotus flower and was patroness of housewives and virgins. Cao Guojiu, the brother of an empress, abandoned his position at court after his brother committed murder. He wandered into the mountains seeking purification, and through his sincere repentance and study of the Tao, achieved enlightenment. Li Tieguai, the iron crutch Li, was said to have been a handsome scholar who left his body to visit Laozi in heaven. When he returned, his disciples had cremated his body, thinking him dead. His spirit entered the only available corpse, that of a lame beggar. He carried a gourd filled with medicine and became patron of the sick and disabled. Han Xiangzi, nephew of the famous Confucian scholar Han Yu, could make flowers bloom instantly and predict the future. Zhang Guolao, the old man, rode a white donkey backward and could fold the donkey like paper when not riding it. Zhongli Quan, the fat immortal with a fan, could transmute base metals to silver and raise the dead. Lan Kaihe, of ambiguous gender, wandered singing songs about the brevity of life, dressed in rags despite possessing wealth. Together, these 8 immortals crossed the sea to visit the Dragon King, each using their magical implement to float across the water. This journey, the 8 immortals crossed the sea, became a symbol for achieving the impossible through diverse methods and cooperation. But the pursuit of immortality was not limited to mythology. Real emperors sought it desperately. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unite China, sent expeditions across the seas to find the island of Penglai, where immortals dwelled and magic mushrooms grew that could grant eternal life. He consumed mercury pills prepared by alchemists, believing they would extend his life. Instead, they likely hastened his death. The quest for immortality wove through Taoist philosophy and practice. Taoists developed complex systems of meditation, breathing exercises, sexual practices, and alchemical formulas aimed at refining the body's essence, energy, and spirit. The goal was not merely to live forever, but to transform, to become lighter, more ethereal, until one could rise to the heavens and dwell among the immortals. In the mountains, hermits cultivated the Tao, seeking to align themselves with the natural rhythms of the universe. Stories told of masters who could fly, walk on water, become invisible, or predict the future. Whether these were metaphors for spiritual attainment or believed to be literal powers varied with the teller and the listener. The immortals represented hope, the possibility that human beings were not bound by their mortal fate, that through dedication and insight, one might transcend the ordinary and touch the eternal. As Chinese civilization grew more complex, so too did its heaven. The cosmic order came to mirror the earthly empire, with ranks and titles, departments and ministers, all overseen by the supreme deity, the Jade Emperor Yuhuang Dadi. The Jade Emperor was not the creator of the universe. That honor belonged to Pangu or Nüwa, or the nameless Tao, but he was its administrator, the celestial emperor who governed gods, spirits, and the forces of nature with the same bureaucratic precision that earthly emperors governed their domains. According to legend, the Jade Emperor had been a mortal prince who, upon the death of his father, renounced the throne to retreat to the mountains and cultivate his spirit. For eons, he practiced virtue and meditation, passing through countless trials and transformations until he achieved perfect enlightenment. The other gods, recognizing his supreme wisdom and compassion, elected him as ruler of heaven. Heaven, in this conception, was a vast celestial bureaucracy. There were gods responsible for the weather, for the stars, for the growth of crops, for the tides of the sea. There were gods of literature, war, medicines, and wealth. Each city and village had its own local god, and each household had its kitchen god, Zhaojun, who kept track of the family's deeds and reported annually to the Jade Emperor. The kitchen god's report came during the New Year festival. Families would smear honey on the lips of his image before burning it, sending his spirit to heaven. The honey ensured he would speak sweet words about the household, or perhaps make his lips too sticky to speak at all. A new image would be placed in the kitchen after the festival, and the cycle would continue. Below the Jade Emperor sat the 4 heavenly kings, guardians of the cardinal directions. Each commanded legions of celestial warriors and protected the world from demons and evil spirits. They stood at the 4 corners of the cosmos, eternal sentinels watching for threats to the cosmic order. There was also the Queen Mother of the West, Xiwangmu, one of the most ancient and powerful goddesses. She ruled from her palace in the Kunlun Mountains, surrounded by gardens where magic peaches grew. These peaches ripened only once every 3,000 years, and eating them granted immortality. She held a great banquet when the peaches ripened, inviting all the immortals and gods to feast. This banquet became the setting for one of China's most beloved tales, the story of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. Long ago, from a stone on the mountain of flowers and fruit, a stone that had been absorbing the essence of heaven and earth since the beginning of time, a monkey was born. He was not an ordinary monkey, but a creature of immense power and boundless cleverness. His name was Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, and his story would become one of the greatest adventures in Chinese literature. Sun Wukong quickly became king of the monkeys on his mountain, but he was restless. Fearing death, he sought out immortality. He found a Taoist master who taught him the arts of transformation and cultivation. Sun Wukong proved to be a brilliant student, learning 72 transformations, allowing him to change his shape at will, and the cloud somersault, which let him travel vast distances with a single leap. But Sun Wukong's pride grew with his power. He crashed the banquet of the Queen Mother of the West and ate the immortality peaches. He raided the palace of Laozi and consumed the pills of immortality. He proclaimed himself the great sage equal to heaven and challenged the Jade Emperor himself. Heaven sent armies to subdue him, but Sun Wukong defeated them all with his magic staff, the Houyi Jingu Bang, a pillar from the Dragon King's palace that could grow or shrink at his command. He fought the 4 heavenly kings and humiliated the celestial generals. Finally, the Jade Emperor called upon the Buddha for help. Buddha challenged Sun Wukong to leap from the palm of his hand. If the monkey could escape, Buddha would grant him the throne of heaven. Sun Wukong laughed, leapt his cloud somersault, and traveled to what he thought was the edge of the universe. He found 5 pillars, wrote his name on one to prove he'd been there, and returned triumphantly to Buddha's palm. But Buddha simply smiled and showed the monkey his own hand. The 5 pillars were Buddha's 5 fingers, and the monkey had never left his palm at all. With a gesture, Buddha turned his hand over and trapped Sun Wukong beneath a mountain, where he would remain for 500 years. Centuries passed. A monk named Xuanzang, called Tripitaka, received a commission from the Tang Emperor to journey west to India and bring back sacred Buddhist scriptures. The journey was long and perilous, crossing deserts and mountains, through lands infested with demons and monsters. Buddha decreed that Sun Wukong could earn redemption by serving as Tripitaka's guardian. The monkey was freed from the mountain and given a golden headband that would tighten painfully whenever Tripitaka recited a specific sutra, a way to control the monkey's wild nature. Sun Wukong was joined by 2 other disciples, Zhu Bajie, Pigsi, a former heavenly marshal cast down to earth for his lustful behavior, who became a pig demon but retained his divine powers, and Sha Wujing, Sandy, a river demon who had been a celestial curtain roller before breaking a precious vase. Together, the 4 journeyed west. They faced 81 tribulations, battling spider demons, bone demons, and demon kings. They encountered false Buddhas, seductive spirits, and creatures that sought to eat Tripitaka's flesh, which was said to grant immortality. Through every trial, Sun Wukong protected his master, though his methods often clashed with Tripitaka's gentle Buddhist principles. The monkey's violence and trickery contrasted with the monk's compassion and non-violence, creating a dynamic tension that drove the narrative. At times, Sun Wukong would be banished by Tripitaka for his harsh methods, only to return when his master fell into mortal danger. Slowly, through his service and suffering, the Monkey King learned humility, loyalty, and compassion. His redemption was not a single moment, but a gradual transformation through the long journey. After 14 years of travel, they reached India, received the authentic scriptures from Buddha, and returned to China. For their success, all four were granted enlightenment and elevated to divine status. Sun Wukong became the victorious fighting Buddha, his wild nature finally tamed, but his spirit unbroken. The Journey to the West, written by Chang'e in the 16th century, but based on much older stories, became one of the four great classical novels of Chinese literature. It blended mythology, philosophy, adventure, and humor into a tale that captured the Chinese imagination and continues to inspire adaptations from operas to films to television series and video games. Sun Wukong became more than a character. He became a symbol of rebellion and resilience, of the wild spirit that refuses to be tamed, and of the possibility of redemption no matter how far one has fallen. Not all Chinese myths are grand cosmic tales or epic journeys. Some are intimate love stories that explore the boundaries between human and spirit, between duty and desire, between law and compassion. The legend of the white snake tells the story of Bai Su-zhen, a white snake spirit who, after centuries of cultivation and meditation, transformed into a beautiful woman. She journeyed to the human world accompanied by her friend and sister, Xiao Qing, a green snake spirit. One day, during the Qingming festival, Bai Su-zhen encountered a young scholar named Shu Xian on the broken bridge at West Lake. A sudden rainstorm began, and Shu Xian offered his umbrella to shelter the lady. Bai Su-zhen fell in love at that moment, and through the machinations of fate and Xiao Qing's magic, they met again, courted, and married. The couple opened an herbal medicine shop and lived happily, Bai Su-zhen using her supernatural knowledge of herbs and poisons to create cures for illnesses that no mortal doctor could treat. But their happiness was threatened by Houyi, a Buddhist monk who saw that Bai Su-zhen was not human. Houyi believed that humans and spirits should not mix, that such relationships violated the natural order. He decided to separate them, using his Buddhist powers to expose Bai Su-zhen's true nature. During the Dragon Boat Festival, Houyi convinced Shu Xian to give his wife wine infused with real ga, which would force a snake spirit to reveal its true form. Bai Su-zhen, not wishing to frighten her husband but unable to refuse his loving gesture, drank the wine. She transformed back into her original form, a massive white snake. Shu Xian, seeing his wife as a serpent, died of shock. Desperate to save him, Bai Su-zhen traveled to Kunlun Mountain and stole a magic herb that could resurrect the dead. She battled the immortals guarding it and barely escaped with her life. With the herb, she brought Shu Xian back to life. Shu Xian, awakening, realized that Bai Su-zhen had risked everything to save him. He understood that her love was genuine, regardless of her nature. He accepted her, snake and woman both. But Houyi was not finished. When Bai Su-zhen became pregnant, her powers weakened. Houyi trapped Shu Xian in his monastery, Jinshan Temple, and when Bai Su-zhen came to rescue him, he used the might of the monastery to fight her. Bai Su-zhen, in her rage and desperation, called upon the waters of West Lake and flooded the temple, attempting to wash Houyi away. But the flood endangered innocent lives, and Bai Su-zhen, compassionate despite her fury, relented. Houyi then imprisoned Bai Su-zhen beneath Lifeng Pagoda, sealing her there with Buddhist sutras and magical wards. She would remain trapped until the pagoda fell or her son grew up and achieved the highest honor in the imperial examinations. Shu Xian, heartbroken, became a monk and raised their son alone. The boy, Shu Shilin, studied diligently and indeed achieved the top score in the examinations, becoming the Zhuang Yuan, the #1 scholar. With his success, the spell broke and Bai Su-zhen was freed. The family reunited, and even Houyi was forced to acknowledge that love and virtue transcended the boundaries between species and worlds. The white snake legend became one of China's most enduring romances. It explored themes of prejudice and acceptance, the nature of love, the conflict between law and compassion. In Bai Su Zhen, audiences saw not a monster, but a devoted wife and mother willing to sacrifice everything for her family. The story has been adapted countless times in operas, films, television series, and books. Each generation finds new meaning in the tale of the white snake and the scholar, the monk and the flood, the pagoda and the reunion. Another beloved tale of star-crossed lovers involves not a snake and a scholar, but a mortal cowherd and a celestial weaver, separated by the very heavens themselves. The weaver girl, Xinu, was the seventh daughter of the Jade Emperor, a skilled craftswoman who wove clouds and rainbow garments for the gods. She worked ceaselessly at her loom in heaven, creating beauty but knowing nothing of joy or love. The Jade Emperor, seeing his daughter's loneliness, allowed her to descend to earth. There, by a river, she met Nüwa, a humble cowherd who lived with his old ox and worked hard to make a living. Despite their different stations, they fell deeply in love. They married and had 2 children, living a simple but happy life. Xinu no longer wove in heaven, and Nüwa no longer felt alone. For a time, they existed in perfect contentment. But the Jade Emperor discovered his daughter's absence and her marriage to a mortal. Furious that she had neglected her duties and violated the separation between heaven and earth, he sent celestial soldiers to bring her back. They seized Xinu while Nüwa was away working in the fields. When he returned and found his wife gone, his old ox, who was actually a former celestial general banished to earth, spoke to him. The ox told Nüwa that when it died, he should skin it and wear its hide, which would allow him to fly to heaven and retrieve his wife. The ox then died, and Nüwa, grief-stricken but determined, followed its instructions. With his 2 children in baskets on a pole across his shoulders, he flew up to heaven wearing the ox hide. The Jade Emperor, seeing a mere mortal daring to enter the celestial realm, ordered the Queen Mother of the West to stop him. She removed her hairpin and drew a great silver river across the sky, the Milky Way, separating Nüwa and Xinu forever. The couple stood on opposite banks, reaching for each other, their children crying, unable to cross the vast celestial river. Their sorrow moved even the hardest hearts in heaven. The magpies of earth, hearing their story, were so touched that once a year, on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, they would fly up to heaven and form a bridge across the Milky Way with their wings, allowing Nüwa and Xinu to meet for a single night. This festival, Chang'e, the double 7th festival, became China's equivalent of Valentine's Day. Lovers would celebrate, young women would pray to Xinu for skill in weaving and needlework, and people would look to the sky to see the stars, Vega and Altair, separated by the Milky Way but drawing close once each year. The story reminded people that love could transcend any boundary, even the division between heaven and earth, and that compassion could be found even in the strictest cosmic order. It also carried a melancholy truth, that duty and separation are often the price of love, and that sometimes the most we can hope for is a single night of reunion across an impossible distance. Among the colorful pantheon of Chinese deities and heroes, few are as beloved or as chaotic as Nezha, the child god whose rebellion against authority and sacrifice for his family made him a symbol of filial devotion despite his wild nature. Nezha's birth was marked by strangeness. His mother, Lady Yin, was pregnant for 3 years and 6 months, an impossibly long gestation. When she finally gave birth, it was not to a child, but to a ball of flesh, a meatball that rolled across the floor. Li Jing, Nezha's father and a military commander under the Shang dynasty, drew his sword to strike it, thinking it a demon. But when he cut it open, a fully formed boy emerged, wearing a golden bracelet and a red silk cloth. Celestial beings descended and declared the child to be the reincarnation of a spirit pearl, destined for greatness. The bracelet was the universe ring, and the cloth was the red armillary sash, both magical weapons of immense power. From an early age, Nezha displayed supernatural abilities and a fierce, rebellious temperament. At the age of 7, he went to bathe in the East Sea. Using his armillary sash, he stirred the waters, creating waves so powerful that they shook the crystal palace of Wukong, the Dragon King of the East Sea. Wukong sent his third son to investigate. When the Dragon Prince confronted Nezha arrogantly, demanding he stop disturbing the sea, Nezha fought back. With his universe ring, he struck the Dragon Prince, killing him. He then skinned him and pulled out his tendons, intending to make a belt for his father. Wukong was enraged. He went to Li Jing's house to demand justice, threatening to report the incident to the Jade Emperor and bring destruction to the entire family. Nezha, rather than show remorse, confronted the Dragon King. Another battle ensued, and Nezha defeated Wukong as well. The 4 Dragon Kings then joined forces, threatening to flood the land and destroy Li Jing's family if Nezha was not punished. Nezha, realizing his actions had endangered his family, made a decision that would define his character. To save his parents from the Dragon King's wrath, he took a sword and killed himself, carving his own flesh and breaking his own bones, returning them to his parents as payment for the debt of birth. "My flesh and bones came from my parents," he said. "Now I return them. I owe them nothing, and they bear no responsibility for my actions." It was an act of ultimate filial piety performed through ultimate rebellion, a sacrifice that honored his parents by freeing them from his burden. But Nezha's story did not end with death. His master, the immortal Taiyi Genren, appeared and used lotus flowers and lotus roots to construct a new body for Nezha, bringing him back to life. Reborn, Nezha received new weapons, a fire-tipped spear and 2 windfire wheels that allowed him to fly. Nezha returned not as a child of flesh, but as a deity in his own right, no longer bound by mortal constraints. Yet his relationship with his father remained complicated. Li Jing, disturbed by his son's resurrection and fearing his power, sought to destroy Nezha's new body. Nezha, in rage, pursued his father across heaven and earth, seeking to punish him for this ultimate betrayal. Only the intervention of the Buddha, who gave Li Jing a magical pagoda that could trap Nezha, brought peace between them. The pagoda became Li Jing's symbol, and he became known as Li Jing, the pagoda-bearing heavenly king. Eventually, Nezha was integrated into the celestial hierarchy, becoming a protection deity and the patron god of children and prostitutes, 2 groups on opposite ends of society's spectrum, but both in need of a fierce defender. Nezha's story resonates because it captures the tension between filial piety and individual identity, between the duties children owe to parents and the rights they have to their own lives. His sacrifice was recognized as the highest form of respect, even as his rebellion remained uncompromising. The moon in Chinese mythology is not a barren rock, but a palace of silver and jade, home to the immortal Chang'e, her companion the jade rabbit, and the woodcutter Wukong, eternally chopping at a self-healing tree. Chang'e's story begins with her husband, Houyi, the divine archer. During the time of Emperor Yao, 10 suns rose in the sky instead of 1. They were the sons of the Jade Emperor who disobeyed their father, and all appeared at once. The heat from 10 suns scorched the earth, dried up rivers, killed crops, and brought suffering to humanity. The Jade Emperor summoned Houyi, the greatest archer in heaven, and commanded him to frighten the suns into obedience. But when Houyi descended to earth and saw the devastation, his heart filled with righteous anger. Instead of merely scaring the suns, he shot down 9 of them with his bow, leaving only 1 to light the sky. The Jade Emperor was furious. Those were his sons, and Houyi had killed them. As punishment, both Houyi and his wife Chang'e were banished from heaven and made mortal, forced to live and die as humans. Houyi, unwilling to accept mortality for himself and his beloved wife, sought a way to regain immortality. He traveled to the far west, to the palace of the Queen Mother of the West, and after great trials, she granted him an elixir of immortality, enough for 2 people to become immortal, or enough for 1 person to ascend to heaven immediately. Houyi brought the elixir home and hid it, planning to share it with Chang'e on an auspicious day. But Pangu, one of Houyi's apprentices, learned of the elixir and coveted it for himself. One day, when Houyi was away hunting, Pangu broke into their home and demanded the elixir from Chang'e. Rather than let the villainous apprentice have it, Chang'e drank the entire elixir herself. Immediately, her body became light. She began to float upward, rising toward the sky. Her heart filled with sorrow as she thought of her husband, and though she could have ascended all the way to heaven, she instead floated only to the moon, the closest celestial body to Earth, so she might remain as close to Houyi as possible. On the moon, she took residence in the Palace of Widespread Cold, a lonely place of eternal beauty. Her only companions were the Jade Rabbit, who continually pounds medicinal herbs with a mortar and pestle, and Wukong, who was condemned to chop down a cassia tree that heals itself faster than he can cut it, his punishment for seeking immortality through shortcuts rather than cultivation. Houyi, returning home and learning what had happened, was grief-stricken. Every night he would set out fruits and cakes in his garden, offerings to his wife on the moon. He gazed upward, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. The people, moved by this tale of love and loss, began to make offerings to the moon during the Mid-Autumn Festival, the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, when the moon is fullest and brightest. Mooncakes became a traditional food, and families would gather to admire the moon, tell stories, and remember those separated by distance or death. Chang'e became the goddess of the moon, a symbol of beauty, loneliness, and eternal love. Her story asks, what is the price of immortality? Is eternal life worth living if it means eternal separation from the one you love? In the cosmology of Chinese mythology, 4 great creatures represented the cardinal directions and the fundamental forces of the universe. They were not merely symbols, but living embodiments of cosmic principles. The azure dragon of the east, Qinglong, represented spring, wood, and growth. He was the lord of water and weather, a benevolent force that brought rain and fertility. His presence indicated prosperity and imperial favor. The azure dragon watched over the eastern quadrant of the sky, his constellation visible in spring. The vermilion bird of the south, Zhuque, represented summer, fire, and transformation. Often called the Chinese phoenix, though distinct from the fenghuang, the vermilion bird was associated with the empress and with resurrection. Fire was both destructive and purifying, and the vermilion bird embodied both aspects. The white tiger of the west, Baihu, represented autumn, metal, and warfare. He was a creature of power and death, the guardian against evil spirits. Warriors invoked his name, and his image was painted on shields and carved on tombs. The white tiger was fierce but just, a protector who destroyed demons and malevolent forces. The black tortoise of the north, Xuanwu, represented winter, water, and endurance. Usually depicted as a tortoise entwined with a snake, Xuanwu embodied the union of yin and yang, earth and water, stillness and movement. He was a guardian deity, particularly revered in Taoism, and symbolized longevity and wisdom. In the center, connecting the 4 cardinal directions, stood the yellow dragon, representing the element of earth and the authority of the emperor. Some traditions also placed the shilin, the Chinese unicorn, at the center as a symbol of perfect harmony and virtue. These 5 creatures formed a complete cosmological system, each balancing the others, each necessary for the harmony of the universe. They appeared in art, architecture, philosophy, and divination, reminding people that the cosmos operated according to patterns and principles that transcended human understanding. As in many mythologies, Death in Chinese belief was not the end, but a transition. The dead traveled to the underworld, Diyu, a realm of judgment and punishment, though not eternal. Unlike Western concepts of hell, Diyu was temporary. Souls would be punished for their sins, then reincarnated according to their karma. The ruler of Diyu was Yanluo Wang, King Yanluo, a stern but just judge. He presided over the first of the 10 courts of hell, each court run by a different judge, each focused on punishing specific sins. When a person died, their soul would be escorted to the underworld by psychopomps, spiritual guides, often depicted as the black and white gods of impermanence. The soul would first appear before King Yanluo, who consulted the Book of Life and Death, which recorded every action of the deceased. If the deceased had lived a virtuous life, they might be sent directly to be reincarnated into a better station. If they had accumulated negative karma, they would be sent through the various courts, each with its own punishments. In one court, liars had their tongues pulled out. In another, the corrupt were dismembered. Those who disrespected their parents were thrown into a pit of filth. Adulterers were forced to climb trees of knives. Murderers were boiled in oil or ground in mills. These punishments were graphic, meant to instill moral behavior in the living, but they were not eternal. Once the soul had suffered appropriately for its sins, it would drink from the tea of forgetfulness, served by Meng Po, an old woman who sat by a bridge leading out of the underworld. The tea would erase all memories of previous lives, and the soul would be reborn, beginning the cycle anew. The underworld was meticulously organized, a bureaucracy mirroring the celestial and earthly governments. There were clerks recording deeds, guards preventing escapes, and complex procedures for appeals and interventions. Families could help their deceased relatives by making offerings, performing rituals, and chanting sutras. These acts could reduce the suffering of the dead or speed their passage through the courts. The concept of filial piety extended beyond death. Caring for ancestors was a sacred duty. Some souls, those of great virtue or those who achieved enlightenment, could escape the cycle of reincarnation entirely, ascending to higher realms or dissolving into the unity of the Tao. Chinese mythology cannot be fully understood without recognizing the 3 great philosophical and religious traditions that shaped it: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. While each had distinct origins and emphases, they blended in Chinese culture, creating a syncretic worldview where elements from all 3 coexisted and enriched the mythological landscape. Confucianism, founded by Kongzi, Confucius, in the 6th century BCE, emphasized social harmony, filial piety, proper conduct, and education. It was less concerned with gods and myths than with human relationships and ethical behavior. Yet Confucian values permeated the myths. The emphasis on filial piety shaped stories like Nezha's sacrifice and the 24 filial exemplars, tales of children going to extraordinary lengths to honor their parents. Taoism, attributed to Laozi and Zhuangzi, focused on aligning oneself with the Tao, the fundamental way or principle underlying the universe. Taoism embraced nature, spontaneity, and the cultivation of inner energy. It gave rise to the concept of immortals, to alchemical practices, and to the idea that one could transcend ordinary existence through meditation and self-cultivation. Many gods and immortals in Chinese mythology, including the 8 immortals and Laozi himself, who was deified, came from Taoist tradition. Buddhism arrived in China from India around the 1st century CE and gradually integrated with native beliefs. It introduced concepts of karma, reincarnation, the cycle of suffering, and the possibility of enlightenment. Buddhist figures like Guanyin, the goddess of mercy, and tales like the Journey to the West reflected Buddhism's influence. The structure of the underworld, with its courts and judges, showed Buddhist and Taoist ideas merging with earlier ancestor worship. These 3 teachings were not mutually exclusive. a person might follow Confucian ethics in public life, practice Taoist meditation for personal cultivation, and pray to Buddhist bodhisattvas for compassion and guidance. This philosophical flexibility allowed Chinese mythology to absorb and integrate diverse elements, creating a rich, layered tradition. Perhaps no deity better represents the synthesis of Buddhist and Chinese folk religion than Guanyin, the goddess of mercy, known in Sanskrit as Avalokitesvara. Originally a male bodhisattva in Indian Buddhism, Guanyin transformed over centuries in China into a female figure, embodying the ideal of compassion. She was the one who heard the cries of the world and responded to those in suffering. Legends tell that Guanyin was once the Princess Miaoshan, daughter of a cruel king who wanted her to marry a wealthy man and produce heirs. Miaoshan refused, wishing instead to devote her life to spiritual cultivation and helping others. Her father was furious. He forced her to perform hard labor, hoping to break her spirit. When that failed, he ordered her execution. But at the moment of her death, a tiger carried her away to the underworld. There, she meditated and brought peace to the suffering souls, transforming the underworld into a paradise. Yanluo Wang, the king of hell, disturbed by the disruption she caused to his orderly system of punishment, sent her back to the living world. She continued her spiritual practice and eventually achieved enlightenment, becoming a bodhisattva. When her father fell gravely ill, racked with painful sores that no physician could cure, Miaoshan appeared before him disguised as a monk. She told him that only medicine made from the arm and eye of one without anger could save him. The king despaired, thinking no such person existed. But Miaoshan revealed herself and offered her own arm and eye. Her sacrifice healed her father, and his heart was transformed by her compassion. He repented his cruelty, and Miaoshan, in that moment of perfect mercy, manifested her true form, the thousand-armed, thousand-eyed Guanyin, able to see all suffering and reach out to all who needed help. Guanyin became one of the most beloved deities in China. Temples to her stood in every region. Sailors prayed to her for safety on the seas. Women prayed to her for children. The sick prayed for healing. The oppressed prayed for justice. She was the universal mother, the embodiment of infinite compassion, responding to every sincere prayer. Her image showed her seated in royal ease, holding a willow branch and a vase of pure water, symbols of healing and purification. Sometimes she held a baby, offering children to those who desired them. She represented the Buddhist principle that enlightenment was not about escaping the world, but about returning to it with compassion to alleviate suffering. Running through Chinese mythology and history was the concept of Chen-Ming, the mandate of heaven, a belief that legitimate rule required divine approval. The emperor ruled not by mere force or heredity, but because heaven had chosen him. This mandate could be withdrawn. Natural disasters, famines, floods, and eclipses were seen as signs that heaven disapproved of the ruler. If an emperor became corrupt or tyrannical, heaven would show its displeasure through omens, and rebellion against such a ruler was not only justified, but cosmically necessary. This concept allowed dynasties to rise and fall while maintaining the fiction of continuous divine order. Each new dynasty claimed it had received the mandate of heaven after the previous dynasty had lost it through misrule. Mythology reinforced this idea. The sage kings like Yao and Shun received the mandate through virtue and passed it to worthy successors. The tyrant Ji of the Xia dynasty lost the mandate, allowing Tang to found the Shang dynasty. King Zhou of Shang, a cruel despot, lost the mandate to King Wu of Zhou. The cycle continued through Chinese history. Emperors patronized astronomers and diviners who watched for celestial omens. They performed elaborate rituals at the Temple of Heaven, sacrificing to Shangdi or Tian, the supreme power, requesting blessings and demonstrating their virtue. The mandate linked mythology, politics, and ethics. A good ruler brought prosperity, harmony, and cosmic order. A bad ruler invited chaos, natural disaster, and heavenly wrath. The people had a right, even a duty, to overthrow a ruler who had lost the mandate, and the new dynasty would justify itself by claiming heaven's approval. This created a remarkably resilient political philosophy. Unlike systems based on divine right, where kings ruled by blood regardless of conduct, the mandate of heaven made rulership conditional on virtue. It was a mythological concept with profound practical implications, shaping Chinese political thought for millennia. Among the great romantic tragedies of Chinese culture stands the story of Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai, often called the Chinese Romeo and Juliet, though their tale predates Shakespeare by centuries. Zhu Yingtai was the daughter of a wealthy family. Intelligent and spirited, she longed to pursue education, but women were forbidden from attending schools. With her father's reluctant permission, she disguised herself as a young man and traveled to Hangzhou to study. On the way, she met Liang Shanbo, another student, and they became instant friends. For 3 years they studied together, sharing rooms, discussing philosophy and literature, growing closer than brothers. Zhu Yingtai fell in love with Liang Shanbo, but he, innocent and focused on his studies, never suspected her true gender. When the time came for Zhu Yingtai to return home, she tried to reveal the truth through hints and metaphors, speaking of her sister, who would make a perfect match for him. But Liang Shanbo, dense in matters of the heart, did not understand. Only when a classmate later explained the truth did Liang Shanbo realize what he had missed. He rushed to the Zhu family home to propose marriage, carrying gifts and hope, but he arrived too late. Zhu Yingtai's father had already arranged her marriage to a wealthy merchant's son, Ma Wenkai. The engagement could not be broken without dishonoring both families. Liang Shanbo, heartbroken and ill, returned home. His health declined rapidly, and he died of grief, his last words a whisper of her name. On the day of Zhu Yingtai's wedding, the procession passed by Liang Shanbo's grave. She demanded to stop and pay her respects. The skies darkened, wind howled, and as she wept before his tomb, the earth opened. Without hesitation, Zhu Yingtai leapt into the grave to join her beloved in death. The tomb closed behind her, and in the sudden calm that followed, 2 butterflies emerged, dancing together in the sunlight, their wings brushing as they flew away, never to be separated again. The butterfly lovers became a legend of true love defying social convention, of fidelity unto death, and of souls that transcend the boundaries between life and death. The story has been adapted into countless operas, films, and songs, each generation finding new resonance in the tale of the scholar and the girl who loved him. While many myths were passed down orally or recorded in ancient texts, like the classic of mountains and seas, Chinese mythology found its fullest expression in literature, particularly in the 4 great classical novels, epic works that wove together myth, history, and imagination. Journey to the West, as we have discussed, brought together Buddhist, Taoist, and folk elements in the adventures of Sun Wukong and Xuanzang. It transformed philosophical concepts into thrilling narrative, making religious ideas accessible and entertaining. The Water Margin, also known as Outlaws of the Marsh, told the story of 108 heroes, each the reincarnation of a celestial demon or star, who gathered at Mount Liang to fight corruption and injustice. The novel blended historical events from the Song dynasty with mythological elements, showing how heaven and earth intersected in the lives of rebellious heroes. Romance of the Three Kingdoms dramatized the historical period following the fall of the Han dynasty, but it elevated its characters to mythic status. Guan Yu, the loyal general, became a god of war and righteousness after his death, worshipped in temples across China. The novel's portrayal of brotherhood, loyalty, and strategy became foundational to Chinese cultural identity. Dream of the Red Chamber, the most psychologically complex of the four, began with a mythological frame, a sentient stone rejected by Nüwa when she repaired the sky, which incarnated as a young man to experience human life. The novel explored themes of destiny, desire, and the illusory nature of reality, drawing on Buddhist and Taoist philosophy while telling an intimate story of an aristocratic family's decline. These novels did more than record myths. They created them. Characters from these books entered the popular pantheon, their stories retold in opera, folk religion, and popular culture. The line between literature and mythology blurred, with fictional characters sometimes receiving worship alongside traditional deities. Not all Chinese myths were grand epics or divine interventions. Some were quiet meditations on utopia, escape, and the lost golden age. The Peach Blossom Spring, a tale by the poet Tao Yuanming, told of a fisherman who discovered a hidden paradise. Following a stream lined with peach blossoms, the fisherman found a narrow opening in the mountain. He passed through and emerged into a valley where people lived in perfect harmony, farming the land, wearing simple clothes, utterly content. They told him their ancestors had fled there during the chaos of the Qin dynasty centuries ago and had never left. They knew nothing of the dynasties that had risen and fallen since. The fisherman stayed several days, then returned to his village. He marked the path, planning to return, but when he tried to find it again, the way had vanished. The peach blossom spring could not be found by those who sought it. The tale became a symbol for an idealized past, for the Taoist dream of simplicity and harmony with nature, for a place beyond the reach of politics and ambition. It spoke to a longing in the Chinese heart, for a return to innocence, for a life free from the complications of civilization. Countless people throughout Chinese history claim to have found their own peach blossom springs, and countless more searched in vain. The myth endured because it offered hope that somewhere, perhaps just beyond the next mountain or through an unnoticed cave, paradise still existed. Among the vast array of spirits and demons in Chinese folklore, none were more complex, more dangerous, or more fascinating than the fox spirits, Houyi. These were foxes that, through centuries of cultivation and absorption of cosmic energies, gained the ability to transform into human form, usually that of beautiful women. Fox spirits occupied an ambiguous moral space. Some were malevolent, seducing men to drain their life energy, or playing cruel tricks that led to madness or death. Others were benevolent, or at least neutral, seeking companionship, knowledge, or the chance to experience human life. The most famous collection of tales involving fox spirits was Strange Tales from a Chinese studio by Pu Songling. These stories portrayed fox spirits as complex beings capable of genuine love, loyalty, and sacrifice, as well as trickery and harm. In one tale, a young scholar falls in love with a beautiful woman, only to discover she is a fox spirit. Rather than flee, he accepts her, and she proves a devoted wife. But their happiness is threatened by Taoist priests who seek to exorcise her. The scholar must choose between societal convention and true love, between fear of the supernatural and acceptance of difference. Fox spirits became metaphors for the dangerous allure of beauty, the supernatural lurking beneath the surface of everyday life, and the possibility of transformation and transcendence. They challenged rigid categories existing between human and animal, natural and supernatural, moral and immoral. Women were often compared to fox spirits, sometimes as a compliment to their beauty and intelligence, sometimes as an accusation of manipulation and danger. The fox spirit embodied anxieties about female power and sexuality, but also fascination and desire. In some regions, fox spirits were even worshipped, with small shrines built to appease them and gain their favor. They became part of the vast ecosystem of Chinese folk religion, neither gods nor demons, but something in between. Chinese mythology was not confined to books and temples. It lived in the annual cycle of festivals that marked the year and connected people to cosmic rhythms and ancestral traditions. The Spring Festival, or Lunar New Year, celebrated renewal and the defeat of Nüwa, a monster that devoured people at year's end until they discovered it feared the color red, loud noises, and fire. Thus began the tradition of red decorations, firecrackers, and lanterns. The Qingming festival honored ancestors, with families visiting graves, cleaning tombstones, and making offerings. It acknowledged the presence of the dead in the lives of the living, maintaining the bonds between generations. The Dragon Boat Festival commemorated Ku Yuan, a loyal minister and poet who drowned himself in protest of corruption. The races of dragon boats and the eating of zongzi, rice wrapped in leaves, originated from people's attempts to search for his body and feed his spirit. The Mid-Autumn Festival celebrated the harvest moon and told the story of Chang'e. Families gathered to eat mooncakes, admire the moon, and recite poetry, connecting themselves to cosmic cycles and mythic narratives. The Double Ninth Festival focused on longevity and respect for elders, involved climbing mountains and drinking chrysanthemum wine, activities believed to promote health and long life. Each festival wove together myth, seasonal observance, and social practice. They kept the old stories alive, not as dusty relics, but as living traditions that shaped community life and individual identity. Through these festivals, Chinese mythology remained vibrant, adapting to new contexts while maintaining continuity with the past. The gods and heroes were not distant figures from ancient texts, but presences invoked in annual rituals, shaping how people understood time, community, and their place in the cosmos. As China entered the modern era, the old myths faced unprecedented challenges. The fall of the Qing dynasty in 1911 ended millennia of imperial rule, and with it, the official state religion that had supported traditional beliefs. Intellectuals of the May 4th movement in 1919 called for science and democracy, rejecting tradition as feudal superstition. The rise of communism brought state-sponsored atheism. Temples were destroyed or converted to other uses during the Cultural Revolution. Traditional practices were suppressed. The gods, it seemed, had been banished not by new gods, but by ideology and modernity. Yet the myths did not disappear. They went underground, preserved in families, in rural areas less touched by political campaigns, in diaspora communities that carried traditions across oceans. They survived in opera performances, in the works of artists and writers who encoded them in acceptable forms, in the memories of grandparents who whispered the old stories to children. With economic reforms and greater openness beginning in the late 20th century, traditional culture experienced a revival. Temples were rebuilt, festivals reinstated, and myths retold. But the context had changed. The myths were now heritage, cultural identity, tourist attractions, sometimes even sources of national pride. But for most people, no longer literal truth. Chinese mythology entered a new phase, becoming material for popular culture. Films, television series, novels, and video games drew on mythological characters and stories, adapting them for contemporary audiences. The Monkey King appeared in Hollywood blockbusters. Mulan, Nezha, and Zhang Zia became subjects of animated features that broke box office records. The myths proved remarkably adaptable. Sun Wukong could be a revolutionary hero, a trickster god, or a CGI warrior. Guanyin could be a feminist icon. Nezha could represent LGBTQ+ identity through his story of bodily transformation and rejection of patriarchal authority. The old stories found new meanings, new audiences, new lives. They were no longer believed in the way they once were, but they remained powerful, shaping how Chinese people understood themselves, their history, and their place in the world. Underlying all Chinese mythology was a cosmological framework that saw the universe as a dynamic interplay of complementary forces and cyclical transformations. Yin and Yang represented the fundamental duality: dark and light, female and male, earth and heaven, passive and active, receptive and creative. But these were not opposites in conflict. They were complementary forces that produced each other and transformed into each other. The yin-yang symbol, the taiji, showed each force containing a seed of its opposite, suggesting continuous transformation rather than static opposition. This principle appeared throughout mythology. Nüwa and Fuxi, often depicted with intertwined serpent tails, embodied yin and yang working together to create humanity. The relationship between heaven and earth, between emperor and empire, between human and nature, all reflected this fundamental pattern. The 5 elements, or more accurately, 5 phases, described another pattern of transformation: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. These were not static substances, but dynamic processes, each generating the next in a creative cycle, and each overcoming another in a destructive cycle. Wood fed fire. Fire created earth, ash. Earth bore metal, metal enriched water, and water nourished wood. But wood also overcame earth, earth blocked water, water extinguished fire, fire melted metal, and metal cut wood. This system organized everything: directions, seasons, colors, organs, planets, dynasties, flavors, emotions. It was a framework for understanding change and transformation, for predicting outcomes and restoring balance. Chinese medicine, divination, feng shui, astrology, and military strategy all employed these principles. They shaped not just religious belief, but practical action, providing a language for discussing complex phenomena and a method for navigating an ever-changing world. The genius of Chinese mythology was to embed these abstract principles in vivid stories, making philosophy tangible and cosmos comprehensible. The myths were not just entertainment or moral instruction. They were maps of reality, guides to the patterns underlying existence. Chinese mythology is vast, far vaster than any single telling can capture. For every story shared here, 100 others remain untold. The warrior women and tragic poets, the rebel generals and faithful servants, the hungry ghosts and mountain deities, the kitchen gods and door guardians, the immortals in their hidden valleys, and the dragons in their underwater palaces. These myths emerged from thousands of years of history, from dozens of ethnic groups and regional traditions, from the interactions of Confucian ethics, Taoist mysticism, and Buddhist compassion. They were shaped by emperors and peasants, priests and poets, soldiers and scholars. They absorbed influences from Central Asia, India, and beyond, while maintaining distinctly Chinese characteristics. They told of a cosmos that was orderly yet dynamic, moral yet flexible, transcendent yet intimately connected to daily life. They offered not one path to truth but many, not one type of hero but countless varieties, not one way to live but myriad possibilities. In the modern world, these myths continue to evolve. They appear in new media, speak to new concerns, address new audiences. Yet they retain their essential character. The dragon still winds through Chinese consciousness. The moon still holds Chang'e in her lonely palace. The Monkey King still rebels against heaven, and Guanyin still hears the cries of the suffering. The myths remind us that the sacred and the ordinary interpenetrate, that transformation is always possible, that the patterns of the cosmos are reflected in human life, and that the quest for meaning and transcendence is eternal. The stories have been told. The dragons have flown, the immortals have ascended, the lovers have transformed into butterflies, and the Monkey King has finally found peace. But endings in Chinese thought are never final. the cosmos operates in cycles. Spring follows winter, yang follows yin, death leads to rebirth. Every ending contains a new beginning. The myths we have explored tonight are not relics of a dead past, but living traditions that continue to shape how hundreds of millions of people understand themselves and their world. They are told and retold, adapted and transformed, but they endure. In them we find the universal human experiences, the search for meaning, the struggle against fate, the power of love, the need for sacrifice, the possibility of transcendence. We find gods who are flawed and humans who are heroic, order emerging from chaos and chaos threatening order, the eternal dance of creation and destruction. The myths of China offer not answers, but questions, not certainty but wisdom, not an ending but an invitation to continue the journey, to tell our own stories, to find our own place in the great pattern. As Pangu separated heaven and earth, as Nüwa mended the broken sky, as Yu tamed the floods, as the Monkey King learned humility, as Guanyin extended her 1,000 hands to ease suffering, so too we are called to create, to mend, to serve, to grow, to show compassion. The old gods may have withdrawn from the temples, but they remain in the stories, in the festivals, in the art, in the hearts of those who still listen to the ancient tales beneath the modern noise. And so we end where we began, in chaos, in potential, in the space before form, waiting for the next story to emerge, the next myth to be born, the next generation to pick up the thread and weave it forward into time. The Chinese cosmos is vast, its mythology deep as the Eastern Sea and high as Mount Kun.